transition it's always a little bit tricky, but we're getting good at it.
It threw me off when it asked for a passcode because I'm used to just jumping in.
Yeah.
It threw me off.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, I got to go back to the email to get the passcode.
we try to make those easy. So hint, hint, they don't ever change. If you want to remember that passcode, that will be the one we use going forward for this working group. I think the Zoom bombing days are a little bit behind us, hopefully. People are so accustomed to it now that we have all the protections we need in place. But here's Amy, Jennifer, Tanya, Cornelia. Welcome, welcome, guys.
Sorry, I got to get in the habit of having all of my Zoom links organized before this meeting starts.
It is an exercise. It's a virtual Zoom ballet that we have going on here.
And it's not like synchronized swimming at all. I'm all over the place.
All right. So I will put a caveat that I have littles home today because of parent-teacher conferences. So if you hear any background noise or screaming, it's probably coming from my house. I'm also putting a link to the Jamboard in the chat. And Lindsay, if you could just re-up it. I think I probably put it in there before Patty joined. So, but this is just a reminder of what we are kind of working from. So it's not formal note taking, but it does have hopefully captured the ideas. And for today's meeting, I was emailing Tabitha, who is your fearless chair of this group. Tabitha, thank you for volunteering to do that. And just kind of thinking about how do we move this forward beyond ideation, beyond the idea stage. And I really appreciated Debbie giving the overview of how we make a recommendation. And the process for the kindergarten transition toolkit, which we heard is very valuable, had several months feedback. And I think my first thing I want to just kind of put in your brains for discussion is we're tasked, or this working group is really talking about an issue that's incredibly urgent. And we're kind of in a crisis mode when it comes to childcare recruitment and retention. And so I want to note that we need good stakeholder feedback on whatever recommendation gets put forward to the full panel and whatever recommendation then gets put forward to the cabinet itself. But I want to challenge us to think about how we get that engagement as quickly as possible so that we can respond appropriately to the moment that we are in. So with that said, I am going to go ahead and pull up the Jamboard. This was also in your agenda and in your email if you need it as well. And I'm just going to give a quick overview of what we have already put forth. And as I'm reading these, I want you guys to be thinking of what are some solutions that we could start to whittle into recommendations. We have a lot of ideas on here. You guys are doing things at a local level. So you've probably tried some things. And what is the recommendations or set of recommendations that we can make? I would love for the end of our group today to start to kind of solidify, 1 to 3 things that we would feel good about pushing forward. So some of we all know the challenges. I don't think I need to repeat the challenges, but we did brainstorm quite a bit of how to address those documented challenges. So some obvious ones: paid leave, increased pay at all levels, enrollment in the state's health and retirement benefits plan. We talked about public awareness of the cost structure. So the catch-22 of not wanting to raise wages because the way it's structured now, that will fall on families, and we don't want to do that. We want pay that accounts for longevity in education. We want more public acknowledgement of the value of early educators and not babysitters. We want to explore opportunities to expand practice-based training. The example here is the work in California, the early care and education pathways to success. We want to advocate for childcare businesses to be exempt from state and federal taxes. We want to, we think we can develop tools, worksheets, and calculators to help establish the true cost of care and pay parity, which could be then used for messaging and for public awareness. We also could do that so that providers who are maybe new to the field have a good way of understanding at their fingertips what they need to build their business. We talked about just appreciation efforts, whether it's gifts or public awareness or appreciation, something that's a little bit more than perhaps what we do now. We talked about embedded coaching and the PD that's in the Head Start model and how there is strong supports in their program for providers to feel like they have that sort of extra oomph that they need to do their work. We talked about the isolation and how do we break down the isolation that some of our rural or frontier providers might be feeling without access to technology. We talked about a media push. We talked about advocacy with the district attorney's office across the state regarding unlicensed care and how those providers are inadvertently skewing the local cost of care because they are able to kind of skirt the ratios and perhaps make costs lower for families. We talked about increasing subsidy pay rates to align with the true cost of providing care, incentives to bring those providing unlicensed care into the licensing system. We talked about leadership opportunities. How can we create opportunities for our teachers and our assistant teachers to advance, perhaps with specializing in things. So serving infants and toddlers, serving children with special healthcare needs, serving children where English is a second language. A lot of education, just trying to look through recruitment and retention bonuses, things like that we could put forth. So that is a lot. So I just want to pause there and open it up for conversation. Something that we didn't capture, perhaps, something that's come up since. And again, we're talking about recruiting new providers, new professionals, not just new owners, but new professionals, which we know is, I think sometimes gets lost in the conversation that we're talking about adding more slots, but we really need to make sure that we're staffing all of our centers and all of our home-based as we can. And then we talked, the other issue is, of course, retention. How do we retain these providers? So I will pause there and see what other thoughts people have, or is anything you think on that I read off something we want to really dig into deeper and perhaps issue a formal recommendation or build something around. And it can be multiple things. We can package this too. It doesn't have to be something simple, but it can be if that's easier. So I'll stop talking.
One of the things that we're facing is a challenge with licensed teachers getting the requirements that they need in order to get their professional license and loan forgiveness. As a licensed child care center, we are not considered an educational institution in the state of Kansas. And so, although we don't consider ourselves just a daycare. We have licensed teachers and we do the schooling for our school districts, and we have to have licensed teachers. In order for them to get mentoring, we have to have a mentor that's with the school district that can sign off on all of their experience and all of their everything. And the school district is not always willing to do that if they can't. They don't know that they've actually been doing what they're supposed to be doing, because they're not on site. And so if there was a way that we could have our curriculum coaches who are licensed, be able to do the mentoring. We've taken them through the same mentoring programs at WSU that, the other coaches have gone through. So they go through and get that same mentoring training to be able to do that. So if there was a way that we could mentor our own teachers, so that way they can get their license, because we have people right now who have to get a sub-license because they've met everything, but they can't actually get their license. And so it's creating a bit of it's hard for us to lure licensed teachers to come to work in our USD classrooms if their experience is not counted. Because like they allow elementary ed as right now, they changed the process and you can have an elementary license to work in a preschool program. But working in our center, their experience is in preschool. Therefore, the experience is not counting for their elementary license. And so that's creating kind of a challenge. And so some conversation in terms of teachers' license, they've already made some changes, which has been great, and that now they can actually work with us and it counts towards renewing license. And so that's been a great change that's happened since I've been around. With that, but now with the new teachers coming in and those that are renewing their license, we're having that struggle. And then the same is then with student loan forgiveness, because again, we are not a licensed institution. We are not considered, we're not an educational institution. And so as a result, they don't qualify for a lot of the teacher loan forgiveness programs unless they have Perkins loans. And so, so that would be something else that, if that's some recommendation that we can advocate for, that would be helpful to us, just to try to be able to meet the criteria that we need for licensed teachers and keep them.
I would just add, Cornelia, that the loan forgiveness is also a barrier for privately owned childcare programs. If you're not 501c3, your staff can't take advantage of that. And then that leaves you with quality people that may leave your program and go to a nonprofit 501c3, leaving you with less qualified staff in a privately owned program.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other issue outside of, licensed, teachers and it's in childcare centers. So like my center, we don't always get staff that, have went to college or whatnot. I do know locally they have started a program to help through Childcare Aware to help get the teachers up to where they need to be able to work in a center. But I think sometimes even that isn't enough. And so they want to go get their CDA, but how do you help, pay for those costs for those teachers to get those? And then we also have issues with competing against other places who may pay higher, depending on, where they're at, how long they've been in the field.
Other thoughts? What else is missing?
I think something that could move us on this journey towards rebranding our early care providers to make Kansas see them as actually qualified teachers, and kind of that whole media campaign we were talking about. That could be a good first step in advocating that we add early care and education providers to student loan forgiveness and things like that. If we do this big media campaign and public push in Kansas about the importance of our early care providers and that they are teachers and they are qualified and we should treat them as such and pay them as such, that goes a long ways towards that federal advocacy that needs to happen. So maybe that's a good first step as one of our recommendations. But I also really liked the ideas of the retention bonuses and the mentoring program for teachers as well.
This is Amy Gotchammer Kelly. I like that you were talking about the messaging for it, because even at the federal level, it's called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness. And what is this if not public service? We're not in it for the money. So it's a public service, and that has to be underscored, I think. Are we still talking about other ideas, or are we just focusing?
It's up to you, Amy. If you've got another idea,
Okay.
I will
Well,
capture it.
I did. Okay. I added on slide 6 of the Jamboard, and that may not be where you want it to live, but that's fine. But I took the under the long-term solution plans, the one about benefits where we could model the CAPERS retirement program. And I just did a little research in, in the strategic plan. And I just added the strategies that we would use, strategy 6.1, and what would success look like. But in trying to go through the outline of the criteria for making a recommendation, I was getting a little hung up there, the clear identification of the entity that would receive the recommendation.
Yep.
So I wasn't sure there, would that go to KDHE or KSDE or somebody else? And then the other background information explaining the issue that includes a description of, and it talks about considerations of equity having informed the recommendation, how Kansas families have shaped this recommendation. So I started looking through the needs assessment, and it was a struggle to see how I could pull in Kansas families shaping this recommendation, because I don't think they think about it. It's not directly, it does directly impact them, of course, if people are leaving the field because they need a job that provides benefits,
Right.
Whether it's retirement or something else, but they didn't specifically say that or outline that in the needs assessment. So that's where I was having a little trouble pulling those pieces together for the formal recommendation. But anyway, so I did start on that a little bit. If anybody feels like it's worth following it through, I put my the green ones are my sort of additional notes on how we could pull together the formal recommendation.
Amy, that's amazing. Thank you for starting to make those connections. In terms of the family engagement, our providers and professionals are families. And so I think we know that providers and professionals are asking for things like benefits. And I think we could easily use, to your point, some of these might be a step or two removed from Kansas families actually knowing that this is, if you ask them, I'm sure Kansas families would say, yes, I would love for my provider to have access to health benefits. And we could certainly go that route if we felt like a survey of that kind would be important.
Oh.
But I want to remind us that our, thousands of early childhood care and education professionals who don't have benefits are families, are Kansas families too. And their voices, I think, would be very useful in strengthening that recommendation, Amy. So,
okay.
Is this one that, like, how does the group feel about saying that's a recommendation that we would want to formally make? What is, and we don't have to, we don't have to figure all of that out right now. I'd like us to put forth a couple different ideas that we can then do some work on. And that's what I will do in the intervening weeks, is figure out what do we actually need to draft that. So let's not worry about the specifics. If we think if we feel strongly that this needs to happen, that's really all we need in terms of criteria for a recommendation. So what do others think about that?
And so is it that we somehow as a state come up with a plan where providers can have insurance, access to more affordable insurance? Is that the recommendation? Or am I missing which?
Well, what I had actually written was about a retirement plan specifically, not health insurance. Not that those aren't, they're all good, but I had mentioned that one because we had discussed in our last meeting that both Rhode Island and New Mexico were models for that. And so I thought, well, that's somebody else we can go to, find out how they did it, and then we could replicate that. And so maybe that was just low hanging fruit. but certainly, it's all good, but I just threw that out there because I thought that was something that was perhaps achievable, because we would have some other model to follow and we could just kind of move forward and get it done.
This is Amy Meek. I really like that idea, Amy. The one thing that gives me a little bit of pause is knowing that like a program like Capers, they're going to have to contribute a percentage of their salary.
Right.
And that's the part that I think might be challenging, or until we get the compensation part also fixed. So
Yeah,
Amy,
I don't disagree with that, Amy. I think I've seen it myself, and when I've tried to have group insurance plans like through Blue Cross Blue Shield at my program, and they had to contribute a portion too, and they didn't want to, especially if you had the younger ones who felt invincible and they never get sick and they didn't want to do it, and so we would get dropped because we weren't meeting our quotas and whatnot, and it's just, I know you're right. It's going to be a challenge to pull that off. And so maybe that is putting the cart before the horse if we don't get the compensation part figured out first. And maybe that's something, if we look into Rhode Island and New Mexico, we can see how did they get past that.
I was just looking at the part on the Jamboard that where you mentioned benefits, where it talks about the health plan, and I think that in terms of Capers, at 54, it's probably a little bit late for me to have conversations about retirement, but and money in there or whatever. But for all of the youngins who needed to start this sooner or whatever, that opportunity is good. But Amy, I would say you're totally right. One of the struggles that we see with people is that it's the amount that they have to get out of their paycheck impacts the amount that's bringing into their home. And so if we can't increase wages, then that's impacting my income even more. And so like we have a 401k that we offer our staff, but it's the participation is not that great in it because people aren't really making enough even to pay their bills, forget about put money away to retire. I like the part of that where we talk about the health insurance on the board because as a smaller business, the more people you have enrolled in your benefits package, the lower your premium is going to be. And if there was a way that we were able to create some statewide group something, and I'm making it up, I don't know if this is possible. I know that other entities have done like group plans or something like that with multiple entities or whatever involved, where we can make it more affordable. I mean, like for us, for single, it's affordable. If you have family, it's like $500 and something a paycheck. Well, if you're only making $12 an hour, obviously you can't have family insurance. That's not going to work. And so some way to be able to do that at a state level, to have some kind of plan, if that's possible. Again, I'm making stuff up in my head. I don't know if it's possible, but if it is, that would be amazing.
I like that idea because a lot of the small centers do struggle to give their employees insurance because they're so small and they can't afford it. And I think if there was a bigger group that, centers can join, I think that might help everybody, because a lot of people do leave the childcare field because of insurance. They want to have insurance and we can't offer that in some of the businesses.
I wonder, are there other groups that we could reach out to, like does Childcare Aware, Kelly, does Childcare Aware have a group plan, or does Head Start have a plan, or something else that we could reach out to see how it works?
I mean, I think these are all things we can explore. So yes, we do, but I'm not sure how that extends to, like non-employees, or if we think about it more in terms of building out like a shared services type of model or infrastructure for childcare overall, where we have a group type of benefits package. I don't know that I can speak clearly to how we would structure something like that. But if there's a shared, there's a way to pool resources and buy into, different services on the back end, including benefits, that might be something to consider for all childcare programs. I don't know. Maybe others have more detailed information they can share on that.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that they would become a part of Child Care Aware's program. I just meant to ask, how did that come to be and how could we replicate that for the group at large?
My understanding is that in Kansas, there would have to be an association officially formed, and then member joining, and the association would have to negotiate a plan with a health provider or health insurance provider. So if it would be helpful, I would be happy to talk to our broker and just find out what the rules are in that regard. And then I could shoot an email to this group once I know.
That would be great. And, I mean, certainly there are member organizations out there. And as long as the membership fees to become a part of that organization aren't something off-putting to somebody making, $11 an hour, then I think that is a perfect way to go.
Yeah, and it might even be that it wouldn't have to be individual members per se. It would be organizational members. So I'll find out on that. And frankly, the association could set whatever member cost it wanted. It could be $1 a year per organization or something like that. If it's not in the business of making money per se, then if it would be probably nominal membership costs.
So we were supposed to take a break at 10 o'clock. Do you want to take a break real quick?
Yes, thank you for that, Tabitha. I appreciate it. So we'll take, I believe, a 10-minute break is what's on the book. So we'll convene back here at 10:14. Thanks, guys.
Jennifer, I feel like I got to a real milestone. Peggy left me with Medusa, which is a big aloe plant, and I was able to repot the thing and successfully divide it into 4 and not kill it. And as of today, I was able to like take out the chopsticks and it can stand up on itself.
Oh,
really excited.
wow.
I'll send
Yeah,
you a picture.
that's great. I have zero green thumb, zero, like doesn't exist. That's awesome.
I'm really, really bad with cactuses and succulents. Like I always overwater them. I don't have enough light. But this one, I have a sticky note and I'm not allowed to water it until it's been 2 weeks since I watered it last. And it's still alive. We'll see.
Nice.
It was a nice break. It's Boss's Day, so I had all kinds of fun, cool gifts during our break-in. So that was nice. Very good.
That is awesome. I love hearing that.
Yes.
Well, it is 10:14 by my watch, so we'll go ahead and come back. And Amanda Peterson has joined us. And I know she was able to listen in on a little bit of our previous conversation and that she had just a quick note to add.
Yeah, this is just a preview for what's to come on a future webinar, but I was able to get connected with some folks at the Community Care Network of Kansas, which is the Association of Community Health Centers and Federally Qualified Health Centers. And they have received a federal grant to have navigator services in the state. So they're currently staffing up for that. I think they said that they're going to have somewhere in the range of 29 folks who are spread throughout the state, largely based in communities who are able to meet with small groups and be able to help people navigate through the marketplace process if that's where they're buying health insurance, and think about for individuals not coming through their company, and then thinking about especially with all of the new federal changes and federal relief, what kind of additional financial support there might be for individuals who are purchasing health insurance on the marketplace. And so we were, I don't know that I think commiserating is the right word. We were thinking through, all right, we know that childcare is a much lower wage occupation than we might like. And we would love to get to a more sustainable solution, but also we can recognize that we might have a lot of opportunity to be able to get the word out about this particular service to the childcare workforce. And then also to think about how we might be able to share this information with families who are served by childcare. So Kate Gramlich and Jonathan Smith, I've got on my to-do list. Several of you will be getting emails from me later today or early next week connecting you. And then they would love to be on a future Wednesday webinar to help share the word about this work. And they also noted that Thrive Allen County also received this similar grant. And I know that we've previously heard about the ways that they've been able to put this together with some of their work to develop the workforce and get stipends out. So this might be stuff that's very familiar to some of you or not, but I had seen the press release that said that they'd gotten this grant. And as they were describing, I was thinking about, like, gosh, in Lawrence with the community health center, or with Heartland Community Health Center, they were like, there'll be some people there. And if there's Amy, if there's a meeting of the Lawrence KSAUIC chapter, there could be a person who could come and share, gosh, this is the service that we provide, and we can help you navigate through to figure out how to use the marketplace and how to get the financial support that you might be eligible if you're an individual and going that direction. So stay tuned.
That's awesome, Amanda. Thank you so much. for making that connection. Do we, so I kind of made a note just about some of the next steps. So Melissa offered to talk to her broker about, just exploring what some kind of shared or group buy-in model would even look like, just to even know what those points and logistics would be. And then Amy is going to reach out to New Mexico to find out more about their retirement model that they have in place. So some good next steps to move that conversation forward. I added here just, so I know the Jamboard's hard to read. I've noticed that too when I'm going through it. And so on slide 11, if you're just trying to follow along, I'm trying to take a few notes from our conversation and then some next steps. And then obviously, if we have something we want to put as a formal recommendation, that is on slide 7, which is for recommendations. So I've noted around Cornelia's information about the challenges with teacher licenses and the mentoring or coaching that needs to happen for that, and how that also bleeds into the trouble qualifying for those loan programs as well. Yeah, Cornelia, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I would clarify, when I was mentioning the early childhood professionals and student loan, I was not actually referring to the public service loan forgiveness program.
Okay.
That is a loan forgiveness program that we're having problems with, but that's, even as a nonprofit, there's problems with it because they're not approving everybody. But anyhow,
Okay.
I was talking about a teacher loan forgiveness. So teachers can actually get a percentage of their loans forgiven, but we aren't considered an educational a low-income educational institution, and so because of that, they can't qualify. And
Gotcha.
so if there was, according to when I was initially talking to KSDE, trying to advocate, they said that really that's a change the legislature has to make, because that's in our state law in terms of what qualifies. And so I don't know if that's changed since years ago when I first started having this conversation, but that's what I was referring to, is just the teacher loan forgiveness versus the public service, because that's more state controlled versus federal.
Very helpful. Thank you. So we have a lot of information specific to those. We talk about benefits, we talk about qualification of things. What about some of the other ideas that we have? Is there anything there? Kelly, you'd mentioned retention. Amy, go ahead. I see you come off mute. Amy.
Yeah, I was just going to mention the retention bonuses that Kelly mentioned is another idea. There's a letter from the Office of Child Care, I'm sure some of you saw yesterday, urging states to use dollars for different things, and that was one of the ideas. So
I will also just note our PDG grant. We will have some funds available in that for some initial, we could call them pilots, we could call them kickstart, jumpstart, whatever, but there is a small amount of money in the PDG grant that we could use to try a few things related to retention, recruitment, like actual funds going out to professionals. So I'm curious if this is something we want to try and flesh out a little bit more as a formal recommendation.
There's some states that were doing it, Sarah. I can't remember what I read, or some models that we could look at to maybe duplicate or use pilot.
Yep. I think Texas is doing some stuff. I know that was the one that I'd read about recently.
I like the idea about bonuses for the ones that have been, in your centers or wherever for a long time. But I think just outside of that, even recruitment is a big issue, really big issue right now too, is recruiting people that are qualified that can go into our classrooms. So I like the idea that childcare aware had came up. I don't know if it's just here in Topeka or if it's anywhere or everywhere, but they did come up with, a classes that they help get teachers ready or people ready to be able to go into classrooms. So I like programs like that, and I don't know if it's something that can stick around. I know that I had talked to somebody before and they said it didn't last very long, that they had tried it and didn't stick around. So I don't know if that's something that we can find, like, I think somewhere I said like a Job Corps or something. But that would be a good idea to have, because some people we can't put into a classroom because they're not qualified.
Yeah, I would just piggyback on that and say I'm still kind of
Come here.
stuck on kind of thinking about just the whole recruitment and the workforce pipeline. And I know it's not something that's going to be fixed overnight, but I think it could kind of tie into the whole messaging about this as a field, and maybe looking at across the state where there might be opportunities for promoting childcare as an option in some of those high school tech programs. I think there's an opportunity there. I think it works really well in some areas and maybe not so well in others, but how could we maybe tie in, if we did some kind of PR campaign or marketing campaign about just the childcare field, then how do we then take that down to those younger students that, could be potential workforce, and show that it can be a viable career option.
That model also gives them a really great opportunity to see if this is really what they want to do. It's really hard at 18 years old to decide, kids are cute, but that is not our work. And, at 18, your brain isn't quite formed enough to make that kind of a decision. So, using that opportunity to be able to have 18-year-olds, graduating from high school who can enter a classroom, then if they choose to really pursue this as a career, then they know what they're getting into, as opposed to those who go, jump into an associate's or a bachelor's degree in early childhood, then spend some real time in a classroom and decide, wow, this isn't for me, which isn't what we want. I mean, we want people in this business who want to be in this business and can afford to stay in this business because we're paying them enough. There's my dream. It's all of our dreams.
This is Amy, and I know some communities do it. I think Wichita's been doing it pretty successfully for quite a while, and I don't know if it might be worth at some point having them either share some information with us or pop on for 5 or 10 minutes or something and just kind of let us know, what their successes and challenges have been.
But I would still, think about in the short term, KDH with funding, we've been able to supplement the cost for the fingerprinting and some of those initial costs. But beyond that, I think a major impact, though it's one little piece of the puzzle, but would be for supporting new potential providers through recruitment, paying for the time that it takes for them to obtain their training, that initial training. So it is somewhat set up as a bonus or an incentive, but really what it is simply paying for their time. It both benefits the individual. So it's a very shortened Job Corps model, but it would benefit the individual because they would be paid for the time that it takes for them to get that foundational training, their first aid, CPR. And then in addition to that, it also benefits the programs that spend a lot of time up front providing that training, whether they come and are there more than 2 weeks or not. So I think that's a twofold, benefiting the individual and then also the program, something to consider as well.
So that feels really tactical. I'd like to, if we're okay with it, I'd like to kind of explore that one a little bit more. and just have a quick discussion around, you know, what that might look like. Who would be, would this be a funding that would go directly to a professional? Would it be funding that would go to just cover things on the back end? Would it go to the owner who is investing in the new recruit or the new professional to the field? Or how would that look? Amy. Sorry, go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, this is Amy Gottjammer. It just makes me think it might be a question we need to figure out with the labor department, because I know once I hire somebody, if they don't have that class, I'm required to pay them for their time for attending that class as an employer. If they get it prior to becoming hired by me, of course, that's a totally different situation. So we might have to kind of figure out the logistics on that, that if they do it after they've been hired, then the stipend or whatever you want to call it, the funding might need to go to the program so that then I can use that money to pay them. Anyway, just a thought, because I'm not sure if that then I might end up having to pay them and they'd get the stipend otherwise, and then it's not as much of a benefit to the employer. So just a thought.
I would think, you know, if it was statewide, I would suggest that it would be something prior to employment. That way they have that initial experience of going through the, you know, initial training at least. And if they figure out through that process, this is not for them, then they're not coming to your doorstep yet. So even, you know, by recruitment, that is a you know, if that's a prereq across the board for them to have the training prior to employment. But yeah, that's right, Amy. If the individual was an employee, it would need to go to you as the program. And we could also, you know, you could do it twofold. You could have the initial funds to cover the cost of their time, and then in addition to that, you could. Once they identify employment, you could have then a follow-up bonus potentially to the program or to them, you know, however that might work.
Other thoughts on this idea? Considerations, or do we have a sense of how much that would be? Like, I'm just curious. Are we talking hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars?
No, I think the initial training can look a lot different, but if you're doing initial training and first aid CPR training, I mean, averaging on the high side of, you know, 20, maybe initially 25 hours, taking that times, you know, even if it was $15 an hour, averaging, you know, like maybe $300. But I see a good, and especially as we think about individuals that, so this would both be, you know, beneficial for both family childcare, new family child providers that are likely maintaining another job as they're preparing to open their business. And for a potential center staff member, you know, they are either coming from a previous job or maybe they're looking for employment, and it's, you know, would be money in their pocket initially. So even if it's cover the cost of 25 hours of time.
When we've had that discussion in past conversations, somebody always brings up but what if we pay for that and then they don't follow through? And that's a lost investment. I try really hard to look at it through a more positive lens. And, you know, at that point, the worst thing that happens if we have another Kansas citizen who knows a little bit more about child development and first aid CPR, and, you know, just some of those very basic skills that they can carry with them to wherever life takes them. And many of these people will have children, you know, have had children, will have children. I know that we need to be very focused on our recruitment and retention, but I don't see that as a complete loss either.
Could it be bundled in some way with a retention bonus that happens in the future? If you stay for 6 months, you get an extra $500, or if you stay a year, you get a $500, something where that would encourage them to stay for a period of time to get a little bit more money out of it. I don't know, just a thought.
Let's talk about retention just a little bit. What works to, what should we do more of to retain professionals? Retention bonuses? Reva, go ahead. Sorry.
I am not opposed to retention bonuses, but I think we have to get the wages up in a respectable, I mean, a $300 bonus here or there is not going to be enough to keep people in the field. I think we have got to get that wage scale up to where it's a living wage. And I think that's going to take a public investment of some sort. I just don't think parents can pay enough to make the economics of childcare work.
When we think about wages and we think about insurance and we think about retirement and we think about student loan forgiveness and all of this stuff, this may be a super crazy idea. And it's a major transformation of the system for a long-term goal. May not even be possible, maybe unintended consequences. But I think maybe it's just worth exploring. Maybe childcare providers don't want this, but what if we transform the system in Kansas to make early care and education providers formally part of the K through 12 system? So instead of K through 12, it's birth through 12. Would definitely take state legislation, but would that be helpful for those of you in early care and education? Would it be more trouble than it's worth? Would there be unintended consequences? Is it something worth exploring?
I think my main concern would be education wise, because right now in centers, birth through 3, 4, 5 years old, depending, there doesn't always have to be education. Like me, I went to call area, which is Washburn Tech in Topeka, when I was in high school, and I graduated from there, and I got a little certificate for childcare. But that's not my CDA. That doesn't qualify me to, go to other places to say, hey, I have a CDA. So if we combine those into the school district, what does that look like for our teachers? Do they need to have a CDA? Do they need to have, what does that look like? And how are they going to obtain that? Because not all companies will pay for their teachers to get that, and CDAs are not cheap.
I know there's been a little bit of conversation about that CDA this morning, and there is some opportunities right now that I don't know if are going to be long-term opportunities, but I don't know if everybody knows about the Promise Scholarships. And there is some ARPA funding for CDA training right now. So there is some stuff out there. I just don't know if it's widespread enough that everybody knows about it.
Yeah, we've never heard of it here, at least not in my center. So that's new to me.
You should definitely check out the Promise Scholarships.
Yeah, and in terms of the CDA, we do have through DCF funding, we have funding for CDA scholarships, as well as for the CDA training track for the 120 hours. The issue is, and I recognize it, though the CDA is, essentially the cost of the training is free and the scholarship is free, that's still, at least 120 hours of your of time that has to be invested that's not being paid for. And for a center-based program trying to support a staff member, that is a significant amount of time that they would be paying for, for their staff member potentially to be out of their classroom, having a substitute in that classroom, or a family childcare provider, it's on them. So some of those programs are out there. The Promise scholarships for working towards their associate's degree are great as well. But again, it's the time that has to be invested in addition to just the cost of the training. But we do have the Cda scholarships to, pay for the hours and for the actual scholarship. But I realize the bulk of the cost is in the staff time.
Riva, go ahead.
I just wanted to speak to Kelly's suggestion, and I do think that messaging around an early childhood system that includes everyone, including the school districts, but also the community-based programs is essential. But I fear that if we try to put them officially into the school district, that family childcare loses one of the best benefits of being in this industry, and that is being a self-employed business owner. There are tax advantages to that could be in jeopardy, I fear, if we try to change that structure. And additionally, I think parent choice is just mission critical to any early childhood system. So I hate to say that only quality childcare happens under the umbrella of public school, because we know that's not realistic or true. And so I just want to keep the doors open for those entrepreneurs out there that are really offering high quality childcare, and keep them in the field.
Just a thought to Riva's point, and maybe to help protect that, looking at our education system, how we have, and I may be like way out of touch with with my thoughts here, but in the education system, we have our private schools within that. So perhaps that could be a similar model for those providers who want to choose to be those family childcare providers, to protect that model and allow that option, because I don't want to take away from enrollment in those centers or family-based providers that are doing well. But I think it would be nice to have some sort of option within a school district that helps to pay teachers better, that helps for communities where there is a lack of childcare, to provide that option for families. There was Lisa Generette had shared a link. It was a PBS special on childcare, and that was awesome. And a segment on there about how a school district was able to provide those services to a family. I thought it was just a really interesting concept. But anyway, just a thought.
Thanks, Kim. I want to go back to the big thing Riva mentioned about wages. And I am as guilty as the next person as a facilitator to be like, got it, wages, it's on the list, But I'm wondering, and Amanda, I'd love your thoughts on this. What is the first step in even addressing that? I mean, do we have, if someone came to us today and said, I've got $1 billion that I want to give to you to increase wages, would we know what to do with that? So my question is really around, is a first step exploring potential solutions and actually saying, here are 5 different options. This one requires this one requires this one, and there are pros and cons to each of those options. Is that in itself enough of a recommendation to at least, they say that if you put something out there, you can't pull it back. So if we put out this notion that there are pathways to increasing wages, it's out there and people have to wrestle with it. So I'm just wondering if that is a pathway to a recommendation that at least starts the ball moving, albeit slowly, albeit potentially where it goes nowhere, but it at least gets the conversation moving forward to tactical and out of the we just can't do it land. Kelly, you came off mute.
Yeah, I was gonna just maybe offer up the idea that we could kind of review what we've done in the past, because Kansas used to have both teach and wages. And those are both national evidence-based models for both improving education levels, but also compensation. So maybe teach and wages is not what Kansas wants now, but we did it in the past and had, pretty good data to show what happened when we stopped doing that. So there's a bit of that, like go back and understand kind of our history with these models, and then think about what makes sense now. So teach and wages are still absolutely national models. There are other models that are similar. We have some things happening on a smaller scale already. So like in Kansas right now, we have Grow ECE, which is really focused in a small area of the state, but has some great data too. So is that a piece then to say, okay, here's where we've been, here's what we like, didn't like, here's what we've got now, and then here's what we want to grow and scale from there. So I think there are pieces already in place that could be expanded if we had the opportunity. We could look at other states that are doing this. There's sort of our history on the back end with that too. So I think those are actually kind of low-hanging fruits for our system, if you don't mind that phrase. It's things that we've done before. It's things we're doing on a very small scale now, and we could easily do on a much larger scale with the right funding and vetting and approval from childcare providers or early care and education professionals overall, and kind of that system buy-in. So I'll just share that.
Yes to that, Kelly.
I'm gonna say I spoke and then no one said anything after that.
No, I think for sure any exploration needs to look at what we've done and what has worked, and then to your point about the pockets of where things are happening, what works then. So Amanda, go ahead.
Yeah, Kelly, what I really love about that is that I can imagine this group doing really tangible work. Like I can really imagine, okay, we've got a table where it says, okay, here's teach as it was in Kansas, here's wages as it was in Kansas, here's Grow ECE. I mean, just being able to say, here's the thing, here's the like basics of how you do the thing, here's the pros, here's the cons, maybe here's what we would need in Kansas to be able to make it work. And then here's this group's and then the panel's thoughts on whether or not that's a good and feasible model to pursue. That seems like a nice, I don't know about others. I can really imagine how we could how that gets from a conversation on a Zoom to something happening, to be able to say, okay, I'm remembering a conversation in North Carolina in 2019, being able to say, all right, here's what we do here. Kelly, I know that you've visited with your colleagues in Iowa, like here's what we do in any particular state. It might be that we don't have one perfect thing where somebody has figured out how to fix this problem, but here's something we could do.
Amy Gottshammer, I'm loving all of your comments in the chat here. So I just want to read them out loud in case folks are having trouble seeing it. So she notes that would a recommendation just be around a study to look at ways to increase wages, what has worked in the past, what Kansas wants now? And she follows that up. Is there some agency that could pull this all together? And surely NACE, which is of course the National Association for the Education of Young Children, would have some information on this. Jen Pishney notes making sure that we address parent pay in the recommendation because we don't want an increase in wages to increase parent fees. I think that's a critical part of any recommendation or any analysis is something that notes where the funds come from. Like what are the other payers in the system that would need to be established given we don't want to increase parent portion. I know we only have, sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
I was just going to say, just with some of those comments too, I think it would be worthwhile to bring in or keep on the radar for this group what's developing at the national level with the Build Back Better Act, because that has like language in it that caps the parent fee portion of it, and could also include other provisions that might impact some of the work here too. And I know that is, an interesting topic and kind of stalling out at the moment. But if that continues, the work that we do here could really be impacted by changes at the federal level if that does get passed and move forward. So somehow bringing in some of those pieces that are currently on the table at the federal level to inform what we're developing here, I think would be really helpful.
Agreed.
Would also be great if we could be ready to move, like put ourselves in a position where we are ready to move in the event that that does all come our way quickly before anything changes.
I know we're running out of time, but Tabitha, I saw you come off mute. Do you want to add something to this particular conversation? Please feel free. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry.
You're good.
But I was going to say, I think I had a conversation with you when we met last week or week before. My weeks are all going together, but that sometimes it would probably be, or somewhere when we're coming up with ideas, maybe asking other childcare providers what have worked for them in all areas of Kansas, because, I'm from Topeka, but maybe somewhere else it's, they have other areas or other things that they've done that has worked for them. So maybe asking ideas from childcare providers and how can we get that out to them to get those feedbacks from the providers themselves in home and center-based.
Absolutely. So I know, Amanda, we are need to come back to the full group. So just a couple next steps for us. I have just some next steps from the first part of the conversation that Melissa and Amy G are going to do some work on. I am going to look at our notes and I'm going to put forth what I think I heard are three thematic recommendations that we could put forth and start to frame that out a little bit. I'm going to send it to you guys in advance of our next meeting. And then if you have a chance to look at it, that would be great. And then maybe in our meeting in November, we can start to put, actually pull some pieces. So I'll try to do some work in the interim and make sure we are set up. But I'm looking at sort of marketing and messaging. I'm looking at the job core, the job core, I'm going to call it job core, but you guys know what I mean. It was the idea that Patty put forth and this idea of analysis of increasing wages. So those are the three things I'm thinking about. If you have other ideas, you know where to find me, and I'm happy to have a one-on-one conversation or have group conversation. So I will send you guys back to, or allow you to go back to your to the big meeting. And I am super appreciative of your time and your brain and your energy in this conversation. So thanks so much, guys.